thank you for joining us today on Cloud Chats. I have the privilege of having Patrick Vaca with me. Hi, Patrick. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Patrick, I'm going to just let you introduce yourself. I know that you have your consultancy. If you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, and a little bit about your background before we begin.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself at this point. I do some work on the side as a consultant. Spent a lot of time working with individuals, leaders at different levels. And we have coaching relationships, really just kind of helping folks kind of get through certain situations. Sometimes get out of their own way. My day job is working with Mecklenburg County government. I have a team of 6 consultants that I manage there, and it's our responsibility to really make and keep the organization healthy. And that is by way of coaching, consulting, looking at human interaction, team dynamics, that sort of stuff. It keeps us busy over there.
It means
Background
you've got a lot
wise,
of emotional intelligence at the county, right?
we spend a lot of time in this space. It benefits everybody.
I know that you're an expert in the emotional intelligence space, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about that because
Sure.
that's always a place right now. And the last question has to do with AI. As you know, it's very popular these days. But, when you talk about EQ or emotional quotient or emotional intelligence being a
Mhm.
critical component of leadership, how does emotional intelligence show up in leaders? This day and age, we have everybody doing leadership workshops, leadership training. How do you find that emotional intelligence shows up in leaders?
So, we often lead with looking at leaders that we admire, right? And if you think back at folks that you have worked with, somebody who has been your leader, right? We really start to look and dig into what was it about that leader, right? And a lot of times the focus becomes, well, they knew what they were talking about. Uh, but more importantly, it's they listened to me. They gave me the space to do my work, right? They didn't micromanage me. They fostered growth in me. Um, how does emotional intelligence show up? That's how it shows up. It's
Mm.
the folks, it's the executives, it's the leaders that have a strong level of emotional intelligence that create that space for their employees. The listening, the understanding, the taking the time to foster growth and development. That's how it shows up in the workspace from a leadership standpoint. Now, from a an employee standpoint, your ability to interact with other human beings is critical. Um, this day and age, I believe it's 80% of the top performers have a high level of emotional intelligence. And that's what differentiates the best of the best. It just shows up in the way that you engage people. It shows up in the way that you present. It shows up in the way that you manage your stress. And the list goes on.
You talk about stress and everything like that. That's kind of self control. What is important to practice self awareness in the everyday life? We have a world that we're living in that there's certain things that we can control and certain things we can't. But self awareness is something we can. How can we practice self awareness in our everyday life?
So the first order of business is understanding that we have no control over anything that happens, right? We're driving into work. We can't control the traffic. We can't control whether we spill coffee on ourselves. Like there's just things that happen, right? What we're going to walk into during the day. And so, you know, it's so important to understand that the one thing that we do have control over is the way that we handle that, the way that we respond to the situation. Because we could have a miserable morning and walk into work, right? Or walk into any situation, and we're going to be a different person. when you think about who we are as human beings, there's a lot that stresses us out. And if you think about how do you show up when you're stressed,
Mhm.
you're going to show up differently. I know personally, I get a little bit edgier when I'm stressed out. And so I'm a little shorter, right? When my fuse is a little bit shorter. And so I'll be snippy, right? Some people just shut off completely. And so understanding what's going on with you first and foremost is critical because recognizing, right, when you're stressed and then being able to kind of acknowledge, oh my gosh, I'm feeling a bit stressed about this. What do I need to do in order to kind of
So what
get
are some
myself?
things can you do? What are some points that you can do?
Honestly, the biggest thing is breathing. It sounds so simple, but when other people are getting frantic, it's easy for us to go, hey, take a deep breath, take a deep breath.
Mhm.
But we don't do it ourselves. In fact, as we're having this conversation, chances are that we're not taking a deep breath. We typically take very shallow breaths. And the thing about the breath is when you actually take a deep breath and you let it go, what it does is it calms your nervous system immediately. That's why breath work and that kind of stuff is now being a little bit more accepted in all kinds of spaces because it's free, it's available to you at all times. So breath is the first thing that I would say. Always use your breath. When you're feeling like you're being triggered, take a deep breath. Right? Find some space where you can just shut off for a minute, take a deep breath and recognize all these thoughts are just thoughts. Let them
What do
go.
you think? What's your, when you say shut off also, what comes to mind? I've had people that say, put a pin on that and they walk away. Is that a mechanism as well?
Well, that's the pause,
Hmm.
right? And the thing about it is, if you think about any situation, right, if you're being triggered and you want to say something that isn't necessarily the healthiest thing to say in that moment, yes, take a minute, right?
Yeah.
I need a timeout. Let me get my head together. So that in itself is okay. That's the pause. And the more that we practice it, the easier it becomes, right? It becomes part of who we are.
So how do you
But
foster that? How do you know the triggers? Do you have to be self-aware of who you are? Do you know when you have to be so aware of your body?
yes,
I need to take a breath. I'm not breathing. I need to walk away. I'm about to blow up.
right,
In this
right.
day and age where we have too many people that are allowed to blow up, but
That's right,
it's
right.
not good manners supposedly, but not respectful. But it's also not good for the individual that's blowing up.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, if you think about how we manifest our stress, right, and our anxiety and everything else, it manifests in our body, right? That's the reason why people have high blood pressure. That's why they get ulcers. That's why they have uh, tight muscle tightness, right, and headaches and all that stuff is because it manifests in the body. And so, um, to your point about does it take that awareness? It does. And so oftentimes what I'll recommend to folks is first, just take a moment and recognize what your triggers are, right? When do you get bothered? What bothers you, right? When you have a moment to just kind of sit and think about your life, it's like, oh, that person really ticks me off, or this really makes me upset. And make a list, right? To kind of go, what is it about that person or about that situation? Oftentimes it's challenging your values. It's going against your values, and that's what seems to set you off. That's the first thing. But then it becomes a practice. Everything's a practice, right? The way that we live our lives, we do it enough where it becomes who we are. And
Becomes
so,
routine, automatic.
absolutely. I mean, we are creatures of habit. There is that is true, right? We are creatures of habit. The beauty of all of this, though, is that we can change our patterns, we can adjust our patterns, but it does take practice. And as with anything else that we're trying to change, it's going to feel awkward when you start and a little bit uncomfortable. But the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. And in fact, what it does is it actually changes your neural networking.
Yeah.
So that's why it
Patrick,
becomes easy.
you talk about change. We do an assessment on emotional intelligence, as you know.
Mhm.
Do you feel that when somebody reads about their emotional intelligence, that'll change their perspective on how they react with other people? And they'll start saying, that is my trigger. I do need to work more on my self regulation. I have to press the button before I speak. It's like I think about it, it comes out of the
Mhm.
mouth. Some people don't have self regulation at all. Do you think that
Right.
that's a good thing if people take the assessment and they know their emotional intelligence quotient?
Yes, there's a certain value to any sort of assessment, right? The question is this, are you willing to grow? Because some people might look at it and go, oh, yeah, 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 hey, that's funny. Yeah, that's me. But they don't do anything with it,
Yeah, they put it
right?
aside.
Put it aside.
Yeah.
So to take advantage of recognizing, right, and really doing some deep, like self-reflection on who am I, what sets me off, right? Uh, and then how do I respond to it, right? Or react. Oftentimes it's how do I react to it?
Yeah.
And then how can I take a step back and go, what can I do differently to respond to it? Right. And there's a lot to kind of understand with respect to our wiring, our what's going on in our brain. I mean, we are wired in a way that we pick up habits. It's a
Yeah.
shortcut because of so much, right? So much stimulation that goes on into our brains on a daily basis. So these shortcuts tend to become habits. When you drive to work, you don't think about driving to work. You just drive to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? When you're brushing your teeth. If you do something enough, it becomes part of you. And so it's understanding that if it's something that you don't necessarily like or it doesn't benefit you, to say, you know what? I don't want that. I'm going to try something different. And then it becomes, now I start to practice it.
Well, there's a question I want to ask you. It says, what are some of the best ways to foster our emotional intelligence? You talk about practice and putting things into motion. So how can we foster emotional intelligence? What are some ways?
A couple of ways. So one, like I've mentioned, right, is really assessing what your triggers are. That's a good one. The other thing is asking for feedback, right? Asking people like, hey, when I'm trying to work on this stuff, where do
Mhm.
you see me showing up differently, right? From an outsider's lens, what stresses me out, and then how do I react? So it's part of this exploration um, at first, right? To kind of learn about yourself, right? So that is that's your first thing, right? Self-awareness, right? That's the first component of the four quadrants of emotional intelligence, self-awareness. And only when you become aware can you go into the next quadrant, which is self-management, right? I see what my emotions are doing. By the way, your emotions tell you, they feed you information. Okay.
Mhm.
So understanding that pride and joy and happiness, like nobody has a problem talking about when they're happy or right prideful, like they want to jump out of their skin. But then you have these so-called negative emotions, right? Anger, fear, sadness, disgust. And those also, some people will be like, oh, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it,
Yeah.
right? And what I often tell folks is emotions are just a human experience. And what they do is they inform you. And so the positive ones, the ones that make you feel good, tells you that there's actually something good happening in front of you. It's fueling you. right, is fueling your soul, like something really good is happening. On the contrary, these negative emotions, they tell you something also. They tell you that there's something missing,
Hmm.
right? And so if you sit in that emotion, say it's an emotion of like sadness, to ask yourself, what do I need right now? What am I missing? What's lacking? It actually informs you. And so that's one of the challenges, is helping people become friends with these emotions and not have to worry about them or stuff them or not even think about them. But emotions are telling you that there's something really, really good going on and it's fueling your soul, or there's something that's missing.
Hmm.
And if you sit in it and ask yourself, what do I need to ask for right now? What do I need that can actually help me get out of this feeling? It informs you.
You know, we live in an age of, it's called the feeling economy. We feel everything, everything. I feel good, I feel bad, I feel this, I feel that. Um,
Yeah.
I want to switch gears now to AI, because
Mhm.
there's emotional intelligence cannot be automated, or can it be? Is one question. Secondly, what is your opinion on the impact of AI on everyday life? Looking into workers' adaptation to these changes, how managers can change the nature of the job in light of AI developments and everything like that. So, do you have an opinion about AI and the lack of empathy that they're saying it doesn't have?
So yes, I certainly do. So artificial intelligence, right, is just an algorithm. And so for tactical purposes, uh, artificial intelligence can be really, really valuable, right? I know there's this fear about, hey, AI is going to take over everything and people are going to lose their jobs and this and that. What we need to understand, however, is artificial intelligence is not something that is going to replace the human connection.
Hmm. No
It
matter
just,
how well they develop these machines,
no matter how well
the
they
human
develop
is
these
always needed.
machines, because it's the human interaction that creates connection, right? And if you think about it from a leader perspective or from a team perspective, you have to have this connection. As a leader, it's your responsibility to make sure that your teammates are engaged, right? You want your folks engaged. You don't want them leaving, quitting, and all the other awful stuff, right? And so, in order to have that, there has to be the human connection. AI, as complex as it can become, and I'm going to cross my fingers on this one, but I just don't believe that that replaces this human component.
You need that social capital building to be human. If we were machine to machine, it's different, but we're not, we're human.
Correct.
Patrick, remember when we started this journey, leadership in the clouds, nobody knew what Zooming was. They were like, oh, how cold it is. They're
Right.
talking to each other. It
Right.
depends. You look into the camera, you make connections that way, you look at the
Yeah.
person, you still animated. So, in a way, our company also is embracing technology so that we can bring this chat to the folks that
Yeah.
normally wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to hear us. Um,
Hmm.
so, as we close this chat here in CloudChats here, what's your perspective of how we're going to be? What are some tools that you can leave the audience with on developing emotional intelligence? I mean, you talked about knowing your triggers, doing an assessment, but if somebody just wants to begin to know, is it just diarizing where you are, what's happening in your daily life, what's your trigger? Is that a way of doing it?
Um, so
Just to
there's
recap.
there's a couple of things that I would also recommend, right? Is first of all, understanding the four quadrants of emotional intelligence. It's not rocket science. You can Google this, right? And it's really just self-awareness, self-management, okay? And then it is social awareness, right? So now that I know myself, now that I understand myself, and I'm managing my behaviors, now I can start to see other people in that same light. How are they showing up? And then the last quadrant is relationship management, which is
So
how do
as
I kind of
leaders, is it important to know these quadrants? If you're a
it gives
leader
you
of a team?
it gives you a good understanding of emotional intelligence and exactly what the value is, right? So I think that for anybody who's starting kind of down this path of like, what is emotional intelligence and why is it important, right? Um, that's the first thing that I would recommend. And there's all kinds of little assessments that you can do online, just like little free assessments and whatnot. Um, Keeping the open mind of I can actually be a better human being, a healthier human being is the other thing that I would say.
Mhm.
EQ is not like IQ, right?
Mhm.
Your intelligence quotient is really based on standardized tests, and it's like, hey, you took this test and you took this other test, and you're only going to be so smart, right?
Right.
Emotional intelligence is something that you can continuously work on. And what are those skills in order to do so? Like I said, it's kind of clumped into different quadrants, right? But the most important is that first one, self-awareness, because then you're recognizing how you're showing up to other people and what triggers you. And when you start to recognize that, then you can manage how you're showing up or how you're responding. Um, Tools wise, I think I've mentioned some of the big ones, right?
Mhm.
Uh, doing kind of a self-assessment of what are your triggers, what bugs you, who bugs you, why did they bug you, right? And how
Sometimes
does
it's just the characters that you have this communications. That's why we do the complete package of knowing your disc, your emotional intelligence, your
yeah,
stress management, and
yeah,
how do you show up? And just taking because not everybody's one dimension. You're a multidimensional person, and
that
not
is
everybody's the
correct.
same.
That is correct. Right. And it's
Patrick,
learning that appreciation.
Um, I want to invite everybody to know that Patrick Vaca is one of our consultants on emotional intelligence. We at Leadership in the Clouds bring these classes to you. We have a 16-hour class that we do, and one of the courses that we have is emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Patrick shows a really great little video. You can Google everything under the sun, but also we do emotional intelligence, but we give you the feedback that you need based on that assessment. How do you use the document? That information is just as good as someone teaching you what's the roadmap
That's right.
so that I
Mhm.
can use the best information. So thank you, Patrick, for joining us this evening. I want to thank you because I know you're a very busy person and you're all over the place, as we all are. But one of the things is that when you show up, you show up. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here on Cloud Chat. We'll see you soon.